All right, everybody, welcome back. Ready to dive into another deep dive.
Always ready.
Well, today we're going to be tackling a poem that I'm sure a lot of you have probably come across,
Hmm.
"The Road Not Taken" by Robert Frost.
Oh, yeah. Very famous.
Very famous. It's one of those poems, right, that gets quoted all the time. You see it on like motivational posters, graduation cards,
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's everywhere.
everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And it seems, on the surface at least, like a pretty straightforward poem about, individuality, choosing your own path.
Yeah, like being the master of your own destiny, that kind of thing.
Exactly. But as with a lot of these things that become very popular, I think sometimes um, the original meaning or the deeper layers can get a little bit lost.
Absolutely. It's easy to latch onto that surface level, carpe diem kind of message,
Right.
but there's often way more going on beneath.
Exactly. So that's what we're going to be doing today on the deep dive is really kind of like peeling back those layers of the road not taken and seeing what we find.
Sounds good to me.
All right. So I think maybe just to kind of to set the stage, to get us all in that Frosted mindset, I'm going to start by just reading the poem in its entirety,
Okay.
and then we can kind of go from there.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having, perhaps, the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same, and both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Ah, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I should be telling this with a sigh, somewhere, ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. It's amazing how even just hearing it again, those words kind of transport you. Yeah, it's like it's so evocative, right? So it's like you can almost like smell the autumn leaves and feel the like.
Oh, absolutely. That yellow wood, right from the start, it just paints such a vivid picture.
Yeah, and the yellow wood, right? I mean, that's such a specific detail.
It is, and it makes you wonder, why yellow? Why not, a dark and foreboding forest or something like that? Maybe
Yeah.
it's about seeing things clearly, or maybe there's this sense of something ending, like autumn itself.
And that's kind of what I love about poetry is that you can, every single word can be unpacked and analyzed, right?
Mm.
And there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer.
Exactly. It's about how those words resonate with you, with your own experiences.
So let's maybe talk about some of the common interpretations of the road not taken. Because I think for a lot of people, they kind of walk away with that very surface level understanding of, it's about, like we were saying, choosing the path less traveled, being unique, all that.
Right, which is definitely there on the surface, but like we said, there's a lot more going on. I mean, look at the speaker, right? They stand there for a long time trying to decide.
Hmm.
They even say, though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. So are they really choosing the path less traveled? Or is that something they're telling themselves later?
It's almost like they're trying to convince themselves.
Exactly. And that sigh at the end, I think that's where the poem gets really interesting. Is it a sigh of contentment or regret?
Absolutely.
Or maybe something else entirely?
Yeah, it's almost like you were saying, it's like he's looking back and he's not really sure if he made the right choice.
Right.
Or maybe he's just kind of acknowledging that every choice you make, it leads to a different path and you never really know what could have been.
Right. And that's something we all grapple with, isn't it? That what if factor.
Totally. So if we're maybe moving away from this idea of the poem being a straightforward celebration of nonconformity, which I think is, a valid interpretation, but maybe a little bit simplistic.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the more nuanced ways that we can read this poem?
Well, one way is to think about it in terms of memory and storytelling.
Okay.
Because the poem is framed as this kind of recollection, right?
Mhm.
The speaker is looking back on this moment from the future. And we all know how memory works. It's not always reliable.
Oh, tell me about it.
Right. So is the speaker romanticizing the past? Are they shaping this memory to fit a certain narrative? These are all possibilities that Frost is opening up for us.
Right. And it's interesting, too, because he says, I shall be telling this with a sigh. So he's almost acknowledging that he's going to be shaping the story in a certain way.
Yes, he knows that he's going to tell it in a way that emphasizes the significance of his choice, even if, in the grand scheme of things, the paths were really about the same.
And that's kind of a powerful message, right?
Yeah.
Because it's suggesting that we all do this to some extent. We tell stories about ourselves, about our past, that make us feel better, that give us a sense of purpose.
Absolutely. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's human nature to want to find meaning in our lives. But I think Frost is encouraging us to be aware of that impulse, to be a little bit more self-aware about the stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah, and maybe to be a little bit more comfortable with the ambiguity of life, right?
Definitely. Because life is full of those yellow woods, those moments where we have to make a choice without knowing for sure where it will lead.
And I think that's what makes this poem so enduring, right? Is that it speaks to that universal human experience of doubt, of uncertainty, of looking back and wondering, what if?
Exactly. It's not about finding the right answer, because there often isn't one. It's about acknowledging the complexity of choice and the way that we create meaning from our experiences, even if that meaning is subjective.
Well said. And I think that's a good place to maybe wrap up our deep dive on The Road Not Taken.
Sounds good to me.
But as always, we like to leave our listeners with with a little something to ponder.
Always.
So here's your thought for the day, deep divers. Think about a time in your own life when you faced a fork in the road, a moment of decision where you weren't sure which way to go. How do you tell that story now? Has your perspective changed over time?
Interesting.
And maybe even more importantly, are you clinging to a certain narrative about that choice because it makes you feel better? Food for thought.
Indeed.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. Until next time.
Happy reading.
See you next time.